Teen picked up by paramedics outside 24 Sussex the same night as party for Prime Minister's son Meghan. Hurley and Glenn McGregor, Post Media News April 24. Ottawa, the PMO refuses to say where Stephen Harper or his wife was the night paramedics were called to the Prime Minister's official residence to tend to a drunken 18-year-old woman who was outside on a driveway sick. The call came early Sunday morning, after a Saturday night pool house party was apparently being held to mark the 18th birthday of Stephen Harper's son, Ben. The Prime Minister's office has declined to comment about the incident, which took place early Sunday morning. "I have nothing to add to your story," the Prime Minister's spokesman, Jason McDonald, said in an email to the National Post. The PMO was asked to provide any information on where the Harpers were over the weekend, or if the Prime Minister had any comment on underage drinking in light of Conservative attack ads on Justin Trudeau's pot legalization policy. Paramedics say RCMP called them to the Prime Minister's residence around 1 a.m. in regard to a drunk young woman near the property's west gate. However, there has been no confirmation that the unidentified young woman knew Harper's son or was at a social gathering with him. It got as cold as 2 in Ottawa Sunday morning. Another young woman, who said she was at the party, said about 20 of Ben Harper's friends and sports teammates attended, many wearing swimsuits. "It was just a hanging out, a get-together," said Devon Von Eycken-Percy, whose boyfriend plays volleyball with Ben. "There was some drinking and mixing and stuff, but no one who appeared to be seriously intoxicated," Von Eycken-Percy said. "We were all very controlled." She said Ben's RCMP protective detail was around but she didn't see either of his parents. When Von Eycken-Percy and her boyfriend left the party around 1 a.m., she said, police cruisers had just pulled up and asked them if they had seen anyone vomiting. The RCMP, which provides personal protection to the Prime Minister and his family, said only that it was aware that the Ottawa Paramedic Service had been to the residence. "This was a medical call and not a police matter," CPL Lucy Shorey said in an emailed statement. "It did not involve any of our protectees." The underage woman was reportedly taken to hospital with a suspected case of alcohol poisoning. The legal drinking age in Ontario is 19. However, a parent may supply their own underage child with alcohol in their own home. It's not illegal for parents to allow other minors to drink in their home, as long as the parents aren't supplying the alcohol. Several of Ben Harper's friends on Twitter had sent messages that suggest there was a birthday party for him on Saturday night. There is no response to these tweets from Ben Harper, whose account is protected. 24 Sussex has an enclosed pool, which was put in at former Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau's insistence in 1972 at a cost of $275,000. The incident has put a spotlight on a family that the Prime Minister has largely kept out of the public eye during his time in office. Ben Harper did make the news in January 2013, when a reporter discovered his Twitter account, where he publicly mused about his height and school. The account was made private soon after. Earlier this month, Queen's University announced that Harper, a standout volleyball player, had been recruited to its team for the next school year. A statement from the university says Harper will study commerce, as well as joining the team as an outsider. The 6'4" student-athlete has been a member of Ottawa Fusion Volleyball since he was 14, the statement says. Harper was quoted in the release saying he felt that Queen's has the right balance between school and sport. He also said the facilities are some of the nicest he's ever seen and he's excited about joining such a proud university and team. Friends on Wednesday described Ben Harper as not the kind of person to be involved with anything improper. Adam Anagnostopoulos, a former teammate on the Ontario under-18 volleyball team, stressed he never knew Harper as a partier. "Ben's a really good kid," said Anagnostopoulos. "I don't think he ever left the sight of the security guards," he said, referring to the RCMP protective detail. "He's not the type," said Jules Mahai, a current volleyball teammate on the Ottawa Fusion Club. On Thursday, Lorraine Harper spoke at Just for Cats, a Toronto film festival devoted to online cat videos. Lorraine Harper is a cat foster mom, and the Felon starring event was raising money for the Canadian Federation of Humane Societies on Sunday. Stephen Harper issued a statement commemorating Easter.
Of the machinations of the leader of the NDP, we had these three parties together yesterday, forming this agreement, signing a document, and they wouldn't even have the Canadian flag behind them. They had to be photographed without it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, they had to be photographed without it because their coalition, a member of their coalition, does not even believe in the country. Mr.
I'm not quite sure what the Prime Minister was talking about, but maybe they've given up on Quebec. They didn't read La Presse today, because here's the front page of La Presse, and if you look closely there, right behind Stéphane Dion's head, what is that? Well, that seems to be the flag of Canada. Let's look video from yesterday. There is one flag over in the side of the room, and then there's another flag on the other side of the table. Those are both Canadian flags, and I'm not entirely sure.
We're not really document, and they wouldn't even have the Canadian flag behind them.
Mr. Speaker, the good news for Canadians who are demanding accountability in law, Mr. Speaker, is the moment of truth will soon be upon us. On April 11th, Canada's new government tabled the toughest anti-corruption law in Canadian history, Mr. Speaker, and the House will soon, every member of this House will soon have an opportunity to stand up and be counted on accountability, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, let us replace darkness with light. Let us replace accountability with corruption.
That the residential schools have came, the church and the government. Your statement you made to the Manitoban during November 2009 in regards to the hurried legislation regarding child pornography. Tom Flanagan, you stated, quote, "But that's actually another interesting debate or seminar. What's wrong with child pornography in the sense that it's just pictures? But I'm not here to debate that today," unquote. That's what you stated. And my question is, and you couldn't even answer it because you even just said it yourself, how does abolishing the Indian Act and implementing the Land Privatization Act supposed to fix your so-called Indian problem?
2007, Harper appointed Zoel R. Dion to be a judge of the same New Brunswick court. In January 2009, Dion ruled against the couple, sentencing them to 1 year of house arrest for producing child porn, possibly with their own child.
Nearby riding of Nickel Belt got $2.8 million for infrastructure. Altogether, the industry minister's riding will get almost $100 million. Wow. What is he building with it? More gazebos per capita than probably anywhere else on Earth. From nearly $1 million bridge to nowhere, 42 kilometers away that hasn't even been started, to $2 million for park improvements 135 kilometers away that is currently mud. It was approved in the name of Summit, but has a better chance of being visited by aliens than Barack Obama. How do they justify this pork?
The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Very directly to the project, the member opposite. He speaks about a bridge in Kearney. This is not a G8 Summit project, has nothing to do with the G8 Summit project. And just because the member opposite wants to spread mistruths doesn't make it true.
Speaker, the Minister of Infrastructure just said a few minutes ago that the project for the bridge was not part of the G8 fund. I have in front of me the press release of June 25th, 2009 saying the contrary. Exactly. Le ministre de l'Infrastructure a dit que ça ne faisait pas partie des fonds pour le G8. Le communiqué de presse du 25 juin 2009 dit le contraire. Est-ce que le ministre va s'excuser et retirer ses paroles ou est-ce que je dois déposer le communiqué de presse? Le ministre des Transports.
What we're seeing are liberal falsehoods, untruths, and mistruths, Mr. Speaker. That is not the case. We're very pleased, Mr. Speaker, to be spending money on some 12,000 projects on infrastructure in every corner of the country, some even in the member for Hull-Elmer's own constituency. We've been fair, open and transparent, ensuring that every region of the country gets their fair share, Mr. Speaker. We've done a good job, and we've seen more than 300,000 net new jobs created. That's good news for Canada.
Au contraire, il devrait s'excuser. He should apologize. It says the opposite.
That was pretty strong language yesterday. You're with us or you're a child pornography sympathizer. What did you mean by that?
Well, I didn't exactly say that, Don. In fact, it was a far cry from that.
He can either stand with us or with the child pornographers.
Mainstream media seems to have made this unanimous decision that it does not report on the private lives of politicians unless it somehow affects their work. Now, maybe that's a notion that has to be reconsidered. I'm not talking about the media going out and pointing to, say, a gay cabinet minister or an MP who's having an affair, but in the case of Vic Taves, here was a guy who was justice minister. At one point, he was looking for a judgeship. He comes from a party that espouses family values, and, you know, at the same time, he impregnated a parliamentary assistant half his age. Perhaps that is an issue that should have been reported because it raises questions of character that the voters, his constituents, might have wanted to know about.
I have friends and relatives across this country, and I have children that are growing up under the flag of this country. And my business, our family business, always operated flying the flag of this country. What I say to Mr. Martin is the values of ordinary Canadians are honesty, hard work, integrity, and accountability.
Begin with an interesting subject here, banking. Everybody's talking about banking. The Canadian banks appear to be in much better shape than the American banks. They have fewer toxic assets. Their losses aren't nearly as bad. No one's talking about bankruptcy up there. I want to learn from our northern cousins. What can you tell us? Why are Canadian banks looking better than our banks?
Well, first of all, I should tell you it is true. We have I think the only banks in the Western world where we're not looking at bailouts or anything like that.
No TARP money, sir, if I'm not mistaken.
We haven't got any TARP money. Haven't got any TARP money. We've
I first heard about Bryan Singer's infamous Coke and Twink pool parties when I was 18 and was at some party in Orange County that a bunch of dancers from Disneyland were at. One of the Twink dancers bragged to me and my friends about how the weekend before he was at a party in LA that the director of Usual Suspects was at and the White Twinks, Coke and meth were falling from the sky. The Twink dancer said that Bryan Singer and his fancy Hollywood friends always throw parties like that, and when I asked him to take me to the next one, Bitch said, you're not white, skinny and cute enough, though. Leave it to a bitchy blonde Disneyland dancer with white highlights and blue contacts to save me from gay eyes wide shut. How what do you think? So when I read about this last night, a look of shock didn't exactly cover my face. The Wrap says that a now 31-year-old dude named Michael F. Egan III filed a lawsuit in Hawaii yesterday against Bryan Singer for allegedly drugging and raping him repeatedly starting when he was 15 years old. In the lawsuit, Michael, who grew up in Nevada, says that he and his family moved to LA so he could get into modeling and acting.
One-time leader of the National Black Republican Council, Larry King.
Larry King was the fastest rising black star in the entire Republican Party of the United States during all of the 1980s. And he was also one of the most evil individuals in this country in terms of being a dealer of children, in terms of being a thief, 40 million that they documented he stole, and in terms of using and compromising and corrupting one after another politicians.
The base for his network was a small People's Bank in Omaha, Nebraska, the Franklin Federal Credit Union. Larry King was its general manager.
Thank you. This is especially an exciting day for me.
Mr. King was a very charismatic person. When he came to the credit union, he was brought in because the credit union was actually failing. He did everything to build the credit union.
King courted the leaders of Omaha's wealthy business district. Banks, industry, and charities placed millions of dollars in King's hands. From 1979, Larry King developed close commercial ties to Boys Town, and Boys Town youngsters were sent to work for his companies.
Boys Town had quite a few accounts at Franklin Credit Union. Those were considered very valuable accounts. They were handled exclusively by the bookkeeping department. But on the average of once a month or once every 2 months, we always seem to incorporate a person from Boys Town.
King used Boys Town as a source of young boys for his business and for sex and drug orgies. Paul Banassi was a victim of King's abuse. He was also sent by King to lure Boys Town youngsters off campus.
We used to just drive around and go up toward the home. That's when we used to do some of the scavenger hunts with picking up some of the kids. You know, just kind of win their confidence, become friends with them for a while. Start inviting them to the parties. The kids were 10 years old or older.
In 1986, King's plundering of Boys Town was reported by staff to the chief executive, Father Val Peter. Subsequent testimony proves that he carried out his own investigation, but that King's victims refused to talk.
Nebraska has a very clear statute that child abuse allegations should be reported to authorities. They shouldn't be reported to the principal of a school, the director of a facility. They should be reported directly to either Child Protective Services or law enforcement. An internal investigation at Boys Town would have no status. I mean, in other words, that evidence collected may be something that could augment, but it certainly could not take the place of an investigation, a criminal investigation.
Could you understand why a very detailed report from a social worker employed at Boys Town, identifying children and identifying their alleged abusers, never saw the light of day? Nothing happened with that.
No, I couldn't understand that, because had I known that had been, I wouldn't put up with that. But is that something like that happened? I don't know of it. Well, in retrospect, I regret having any association with Larry King. Had I known it at the time, it would never have happened.
Despite the investigation, Larry King remained free to feed his pedophilic parties with child victims. But in 1988, a routine review brought the Boys Town cases to the attention of Nebraska's State Foster Care Review Board.
And the information presented to the Foster Care Review Board, either via the telephone reports, the personal reports, or the reports we reviewed, Larry King's name was consistently present as someone that the youth were making allegations against. I mean, I turned that information over to authorities, and nothing happened. I would say we handed over at least a foot-high amount of material. Generally speaking, the allegations were ignored.
Omaha police now accept that Larry King may have been abusing children.
Good morning, Roberta.
But its most senior detective claims he never received any evidence.
It is certainly possible that Mr. King was involved in illegal acts with children. If there was sufficient evidence of those types of allegations, he would have been prosecuted by the county attorney's office.
For me, it was very clear that the case was not investigated and not pursued because of the alleged perpetrators.
Those perpetrators named by the children formed a ring of rich and powerful pedophiles in Omaha. Men from industry, politics, the media, even the police. Besides Larry King, ringleaders were department store billionaire Alan Baer, and the celebrity columnist of the Omaha World Herald newspaper, Peter Citron. With the judicial system apparently paralyzed, Larry King's political and business empire grew. He courted the Republican Party nationally and plundered Franklin's accounts to finance a luxury lifestyle of limousines, private planes and palatial homes, 3 in Omaha and 1 in Washington, D.C. Franklin's records show he spent $10 million on jewelry, flowers and private planes. And his lavish spending bought him a charmed life.
Larry King was constantly heralded, cheered, applauded in the news media as the great businessman that's helping the poor people, the black community of Omaha.
but King's extravagance attracted the attention of the Internal Revenue Service. As a result, on April the 11th, 1988, the Franklin Credit Union was raided and closed by the FBI. King was arrested, and a federal investigation showed he'd stolen $40 million from Franklin. But the FBI's inquiries were secret, and evidence of King's sex ring was quickly covered up. In November 1988, Nebraska's state government set up a parallel investigation into the Franklin financial collapse. A legislative committee was formed. Its chairman was the Republican head of Nebraska's banking committee, corn farmer and state senator Lawrence Schmidt. But the money trail led quickly to the original allegations of child abuse, and almost immediately anonymous threats began.
I received a phone call on the floor of the legislature. The caller did not identify himself, but he said, "Lauren, you do not want to have an investigation of the Franklin Federal Credit Union." And I asked who I was speaking to, and they said, "That doesn't matter, but you shouldn't have that investigation." And I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "It will reach to the highest levels of the Republican Party." And we're both good Republicans.
The night before we testified before the legislative committee, I did receive a phone call at home that said, "If you speak, you won't live to regret it."
Undeterred, Schmidt's committee hired professional investigators Karen Ormiston and Gary Caradori.
When we hired Mr. Caradori, I was very specific to him. I said, "We do not want you to bring to the committee rumors, innuendos, nothing that cannot be backed up with facts." I said, "Bring to the committee that which we can take to a prosecutor."
On the streets of Omaha, Gary Caradori and Karen Ormiston found new victims of King's paedophile network. Every new youngster told the same stories as those from Boys Town, covered up 3 years earlier.
They were telling us about prominent people in Omaha and elsewhere that were abusing children at parties.
The prominent citizens' names that originally came up were of concern to me because I knew many of those individuals, and I very frankly was shocked to have those names show up on the list.
Ormiston and Caradori recorded their new witnesses on videotape. A victim of abuse since he was 8, Paul Benassi was present at many of Larry King's sex parties.
Who are some of these people that would come to these parties?
Larry King, Peter Citron once in a while. He didn't seem like he was a like people.
Media personality Peter Citron procured some of his victims from Boys Town.
The kids he liked were mainly around the age of probably about 8 and 13. It was mainly fondling and oral sex with them. He did have some anal sex, but he usually did that with the older kids.
But Citron's abuse of Paul Benassi involved ever more sadistic parties.
He and another guy tied me up and
Okay.
Yeah. They tied me up and had some other kids perform sex on me, and they were saying to me and they burned me some cigarettes.
Okay. Just take a deep breath now. Whenever you were tied up, was there anybody else present other than you, Peter Citron, and Danny King?
Yes.
Who was that?
It was Alan Barris and Terrence, Larry King, Paul Marino, and then also Troy Bonner.
Troy Bonner would tie you up? I was there.
Troy Bonner was 17 when he was introduced to the paedophile parties by Alan Bear.
He lifted me up, kind of moved me over the bed, said let's get on the bed, and put his head down, started performing oral sex on me while his penis was at my end. As they say, a 69 position. Yeah.
Alan Bear was a sick fuck. Didn't care, you know, wanted sex, nasty, you know, I don't even know if you can call it sex, you know, and take it any way he can get it, pay for it, he liked to, but if he had to take it by force, he would. Larry King was the same kind of sick fuck Alan Bear was, except Larry King was more violent, more sure of himself, you know. I mean, I would, you know, see him fuck a 10-year-old boy in the ass, you know, until he bled, and, you know, just pull out and stop, and, you know, push him down, you know, and then go out and, you know, meet with decent people.
King would also provide underage girls for abuse. Alicia Rowan was 15 when she attended her first party.
I met some guys there that were from Boys Town, and it was at that party that I met Larry King. At the time that I met Larry King, I did not know that he was Larry King. I had met him. It was the first time I'd ever met him.
Alan Bear and Larry King frequently hosted the child sex parties in penthouse apartments at the Twin Towers luxury block.
A lot of it was me handcuffed with my hands behind my head and my feet tied, and doing different things.
What do you mean?
Sometimes there'd be a guy straddling over my face.
Okay.
Most of the time, Larry King took pictures quite a bit during that time.
I know it's difficult.
I don't know.
Okay.
And I think I could have said no.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Okay. And you know, Alicia, you're a victim. And at the young age, let's go off camera for a minute.
We were appalled. Appalled. It was incredible. It's incredible what these kids went through, I think.
I was shocked when I walked in. There was a kid, I would say about 15 years old, out in the middle of the room. One guy was standing in front of him. He was bent over, and the other guy was like reaching under him, playing with his nipples, while a guy whom Jeff told me was a police officer shoving beads up his rectum. The police officer was shoving beads up his rectum? Yes.
And a big around, you know, stuck into you, into your ass, you know. Heat things, hot things, you know, poked at you and stuck in you, you know. I got those scars on my arm one night at a party where Larry King was, and he had brought somebody, I don't clearly remember who it was, you know, wanted to see how strong a men we were or something, you know, and have us push our arms together. And you push your arms together. King has these same scars. And you push them tight together, and then you light cigarettes, and as soon as you get burning, you just drop them down between your arms and, you know, let it burn. You know, and they made us stand there naked and touch each other by holding our arms together and burn cigarettes. You know, it's on film someplace. I mean, they filmed it, burning, you know.
And those of us that didn't like to be involved and didn't want to be involved were threatened.
Okay. Oh, so, and who would do these threatening remarks?
Larry King.
Do you think Larry King personally did?
I mean, I think he did. And when they threatened, you know, that I can go find somebody that will kill you, and it will kill your family. You don't tell anybody.
Larry King was also here. He came in and we drank and did cocaine. I didn't do much, and he turned me on to it. Larry King did.
He didn't like me because, you know, I would get high on drugs, you know, and I would question him about, you know, how can you do that? I mean, once I asked him, you know, he wanted me to shit on him, urinate on him, you know, and I did, but gladly. You know, I mean, you know, I even said to him, you know, you stupid fucker. You know, I mean, I just sit in here paying me money. How can you get into that, you know? And I got, you know, beat up by it. I came home here a lot of times beat the shit from, you know, misspeaking my tongue, so to speak, and, you know, a lot of times beat the shit from, you know, misspeaking my tongue, so to speak, and, you know, just telling them how I felt sometimes.
Drugs was a strong part of how they got control of some of the kids, because that's what some of the kids were there to get. They would do the sexual acts and then be provided with cocaine or whatever type of drug they wanted.
Heroin, you know, I don't know, but that was my drug of choice, you know. Till this day I remain an addict, you know.